The rain was pouring heavily outside, tapping on the cracked windows of the small wooden house where Tiana stood, clutching her two children close to her chest. The sound of thunder roared like her own heart, loud, uneven, and full of fear. Her husband Marcus stood at the doorway, his face cold and unrecognizable. The man who once whispered promises of love was now shouting curses, his breath heavy with the smell of alcohol. "Take your kids and get out," he screamed, pointing toward the door. "You and those children are nothing but a burden." Tiana froze. Her hands trembled as she looked at him, her eyes searching for a glimpse of the man she once loved. But he was gone, replaced by someone cruel, broken, and heartless. "Marcus, please," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "It's raining outside." "The kids," I said, "get out." He shouted again, his voice echoing through the house. He grabbed her bag and threw it at her feet. The small lamp near the table fell and shattered, scattering glass across the floor. Her youngest child, Amari, started crying loudly. Her older son, Jalen, only 6 years old, stood still, his eyes wide with fear. Tiana's heart broke into pieces. She knew there was no point arguing. The man before her had already made his decision. So, with trembling hands, she picked up her bag, held her children close, and walked out into the storm. The rain soaked her clothes instantly, but she didn't stop walking. Every drop that hit her skin felt like a slap from fate, cold, sharp, and undeserved. They found shelter under a bus stop miles away. The children shivered, hungry and wet. Tiana wrapped them with her shawl and tried to stay strong. "Mommy, are we going home?" Jalen asked softly. She looked at him and forced a weak smile. "We'll find a new home, baby. A better one." But inside, her heart was breaking. She had nothing left. No money, no family nearby, no one to call for help. Just two small children depending entirely on her. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat awake watching the city lights in the distance, praying silently for strength. She remembered how it all started, how love had once felt so real. Marcus had been charming, kind, and full of dreams. They had met at a church event when Tiana was barely 20. He promised her the world. He said he'd take care of her and give their children the life she never had. But promises are cheap when made by weak men. The first few years were good, simple, but happy. Tiana stayed home caring for their children while Marcus worked odd jobs. Then came the debts, the drinking, the anger, and now this when the morning sun finally rose. Tiana made a decision. She wouldn't beg, she wouldn't cry anymore. If the world had decided to turn its back on her, she would build her own way. With her two children by her side, she walked to the nearest town. Every step hurts, but she kept moving. They found a small shelter for single mothers. It wasn't perfect, the rooms were cramped, and the food was basic, but it was safe. For the first time in days, her children slept peacefully. That night, Tiana whispered to herself, the days that followed were some of the hardest in Tiana's life. Living at the women's shelter was not easy. The room she shared with her two children was small, just two old beds, a flickering light bulb, and a window that barely closed. But she reminded herself constantly, at least we have a roof. Every morning she woke up before dawn, quietly preparing her children for the day. She would braid Jalen's hair neatly and make sure Amari had her small toy, the only thing she had saved from their old house. Then she would step out into the cold streets to look for work. The first few weeks were brutal. Nobody wanted to hire a woman with no references and two kids. Some shop owners looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. She applied everywhere: restaurants, cleaning jobs, laundromats, and even construction sites. But every no she heard felt like a brick added to the weight she was already carrying. One evening, she returned to the shelter exhausted. Her clothes smelled of sweat and rain, her hands rough and dry. She sat beside her children, watching them eat the soup the shelter provided. Jalen looked up at her and smiled weakly. "Mommy, when you get a job, can we get our own house?" Tiana swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Yes, baby. We will. Mommy promises." She didn't have the heart to tell him that she had less than $10 left in her pocket. That night, as everyone slept, she sat near the window and prayed. Her faith had always been her strength, even when everything else had failed her. God, she whispered softly, I don't need much. Just a chance. Just one chance to prove I can do it. And the next morning, that chance arrived at a small cafe downtown. The manager was looking for someone to clean tables and help in the kitchen. When Tiana walked in, she expected another rejection. But something about her determination caught his eye. You sure you can handle long hours? The manager asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, sir. I'll work day and night if I have to. He nodded slowly. All right. You start tomorrow. Minimum wage, 6 days a week. Be on time. Tiana almost cried from relief. She thanked him again and again, promising she wouldn't let him down. That night, when she told her children, Jalen jumped with excitement. Mommy, you got the job. We can buy a house now. Not yet. She laughed softly, tears in her eyes. But it's a start, baby. It's a start. The cafe job was tough. Endless cleaning, heavy trays, rude customers, and long hours on her feet. Her hands blistered and her back ached constantly. But she never complained. Every dollar she earned went into a small tin box she hid under the bed at the shelter. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, things began to change. She managed to rent a small apartment, just one room, but it was theirs. For the first time, she cooked for her children in her own kitchen again. She made rice and beans and sang softly while stirring the pot. Her children laughed and danced around her, and in that tiny kitchen, they found happiness again. One afternoon, as she was cleaning tables, a regular customer named Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman with kind eyes, called her over. You work hard, dear, she said kindly. You remind me of myself when I was young. What's your name? Tiana, ma'am? Well, Tiana, keep that fire in your heart. Hard work always pays off. Those simple words stayed with her. Every time she felt tired or hopeless, she would repeat them silently. Hard work always pays off. And indeed, it started too. The cafe owner noticed her dedication and offered her a promotion, assistant supervisor. The pay wasn't huge, but it was enough to move her children into a better apartment and buy them new clothes. For the first time in years, Tiana felt proud of herself, but fate wasn't done testing her yet. One evening, as she walked home from work, she saw a familiar figure across the street. Marcus. Her heart stopped. He looked different, older, thinner, eyes bloodshot and clothes dirty. He was standing near a liquor store, arguing with someone for money. He didn't see her, but she couldn't move. Memories came flooding back, the shouting, the rain, the fear. For a moment, she felt pity. But then she remembered the night he threw her and her children into the storm. She turned and walked away without looking back that night. As she tucked her children into bed, she realized something powerful. She didn't need revenge anymore. Her success was her revenge. Her peace was her power. Still, deep down, a part of her new life had more surprises waiting, because karma always circles back, and Marcus's time was coming soon. This isn't the end. This is the start of my story. And deep down, something inside her, something fierce and powerful, began to awaken. Months passed, and Tiana's life began to take a new shape. Her mornings started early, preparing breakfast for her kids, and her evenings ended late after long shifts at the cafe. But unlike before, she carried peace in her heart. Her children were safe, healthy, and going to school. The cafe had become like a second home to her. Customers greeted her warmly, and even the manager, who once barely noticed her, now trusted her completely. She managed the morning shifts, trained new workers, and was known for her calm nature and steady hands. Miss Tiana, always smiling, one of the new waitresses said one day, "How you stay so strong." Tiana smiled softly, wiping down a table. "Because I've already seen my worst days. Now everything feels like a blessing." But even with her new stability, there were nights when she sat alone and thought about her past. The betrayal, the pain, the endless fear, all of it still lingered in the corners of her heart. She had learned to survive, yes, but part of her still struggled to forgive. She thought of Marcus often. Was he still drinking? Still wandering the streets? Or had he disappeared for good? She didn't know, and she didn't want to. But destiny had other plans. One evening, the cafe was busy as usual. The sound of laughter, coffee machines hissing, and the smell of pastries filled the air. Tiana was behind the counter, focused on orders, when a man stumbled in. His clothes were worn out, his hair messy, and his eyes hollow. When he looked up, Tiana froze. It was Marcus. For a second, time stopped. The sound of her heart echoed louder than the noise around her. He didn't recognize her immediately. He walked up to the counter slowly, staring at the food. Can I get some coffee?" he said weakly. Tiana's throat went dry. She could feel her past flashing before her eyes the night he pushed her. The fear in her children's cries, the storm. But she stayed calm. "Sure," she said quietly, her voice steady but cold. "Black coffee." He nodded. She poured the coffee and placed it in front of him. As he reached out to take it, their eyes met and realization dawned on his face. "Tiana," he whispered. She said nothing. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes held no fear. "You? You work here?" he asked, his voice breaking. She finally spoke. "Yes, I work here. I live here. I survived." He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't mean to. I was just angry. Things were bad back then." Tiana's tone stayed calm but sharp as a knife. "You threw me and your children into the street, Marcus. You made us beg for food. You don't get to blame it on being angry." He tried to speak, but she raised her hand. "No, you don't need to say anything. I forgave you a long time ago, not for you, but for me." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Tiana, I have nothing now. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I just wanted something warm." Tiana looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the kitchen. "Give this man a sandwich," she told the cook quietly. When it came out, she placed it in front of Marcus. "Eat," she said softly. "But after this, don't come here again." He looked at her surprised, ashamed, broken. "You're a good woman," he said. "No," she replied, turning away. "I'm just a woman who learned to be strong." That night, when she came home, she felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. Her children were asleep, and as she watched them, she whispered to herself, "It's over now. It's really over." But life wasn't done rewarding her yet. The next week, the cafe owner called her into his office. "Tiana," said with a smile, "we're opening a new branch across town. I want you to manage it." Her eyes widened. "Me? Manage?" "Yes. You've earned it. You're hardworking, honest, and people trust you. The position comes with a raise and a company apartment." Tiana could barely breathe. Tears welled in her eyes as she covered her mouth. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." She walked home that evening under the golden sunset, her heart light for the first time in years. When she told her children the news, Jalen jumped up and hugged her tight. "Mommy, you did it!" he shouted. Tiana smiled, tears in her eyes. "No, baby. We did it." The new cafe opened in the heart of the city, bright, modern, and full of life. Tiana wore her new uniform proudly, her name tag reading Manager Tiana B. She worked harder than ever, not out of fear, but out of pride. Customers respected her. Employees admired her, and for once in her life, she didn't just survive, she thrived. But one day, while organizing the back office, she came across a small envelope slipped under the door. It was from Marcus. Inside was a short note. "Tiana, I'm leaving town. You were right. I was a fool. I don't deserve forgiveness, but thank you for feeding me when I was starving. You're stronger than I ever was. Take care of the kids and yourself." She read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her drawer. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply closed her eyes and whispered goodbye. Weeks later, Tiana stood in front of her new cafe window, watching people come and go. She thought about everything: the pain, the hunger, the humiliation, and realized that every step had led her here. Her scars hadn't destroyed her. They had shaped her. Years passed, and the days of struggle became distant memories. like shadows that slowly faded with each sunrise. Tiana's life had changed completely. She was no longer the frightened woman who trembled every time the door knocked. She was confident now, a mother, a manager, and a woman who had rebuilt her world from ashes. The cafe thrived under her leadership. Customers loved the place not just for the coffee, but for the warmth that Tiana's presence brought. People said the cafe felt different, like it had a soul, and in many ways it did. It carried her strength, her patience, and her belief that kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. Her children had grown too. Jalen was now a teenager, tall and sharp, with the same calm strength as his mother. Little Ava was turning 10, full of energy and laughter. They both adored their mom. Every evening they'd wait for her by the window, waving when she came home with her familiar tired smile. Despite her success, Tiana never forgot where she came from. She made it a point to help others who were struggling. She donated food, helped single mothers find jobs, and even offered part-time shifts at her cafe to young people who needed a second chance. "I just want to be the person I needed when I was broken," she told her staff once. They looked at her in admiration. She wasn't just their boss, she was an inspiration. One evening, after closing the cafe, Tiana sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights twinkled outside, and the quiet hum of cars filled the distance. Her mind wandered back to the old days, the dark nights, the hunger, the tears, but instead of pain, a strange peace filled her heart. It had taken her years to realize something important. Life wasn't unfair. It was simply a teacher. The hardest lessons came disguised as heartbreak, and the people who hurt her had only taught her what she never wanted to become. She looked at her reflection in the glass, the same brown eyes. A few wrinkles now, but a strength in her expression that hadn't been there before. She whispered softly, "I made it." A few weeks later, the cafe hosted its anniversary celebration. It had been 5 years since she became manager. There was laughter, music, and joy in the air. The owner, now more like a friend, raised a toast to Tiana. He said proudly, "For turning this cafe into a home for everyone. You've shown us that leadership isn't about control, it's about heart." The crowd clapped, cheering her name. Tiana's eyes filled with tears as she smiled shyly. "Thank you," she said into the microphone. "But this cafe, it isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who believed in second chances." Then she turned and saw something that made her heart skip at the door. A familiar face, Marcus. He stood quietly, looking healthier than before. He wore clean clothes, his face calm, and in his eyes, remorse. Tiana's breath caught, but she didn't panic. This time there was no fear. After the event ended, Marcus approached her. "You've done well, Tiana," he said softly. She nodded. "I've worked hard. For me and for them." We looked down. "I've been sober for a year now. I work at a repair shop outside the city. I wanted to come and thank you for forgiving me that day." Tiana studied him for a long moment. He wasn't the man she once feared. He looked tired, older, and humbled. "Marcus," she said gently, "the past can't be undone, but I hope you've learned from it." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I have. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Tiana gave a small, genuine smile. "I know. Take care of yourself." And with that, their story, one of pain, regret, and survival, quietly came to an end that night. After everyone had gone home, Tiana walked to the cafe's rooftop. The city stretched before her, a sea of lights glowing against the dark sky. The cool breeze brushed her face. Carrying whispers of peace, she thought of all the women like her, those who were silenced, abandoned, broken, and she wished she could tell them what she now knew. That being left alone didn't mean being destroyed. That losing everything sometimes meant finding yourself. And that love, the truest kind, often begins with loving yourself enough to rise again. The next morning, Tiana woke to the sound of laughter. Jalen and Ava were in the kitchen trying to make pancakes and failing miserably. "Batter was everywhere, Mom," Ava shouted, giggling. "We tried to surprise you." Tiana laughed, the sound light and warm. "Well, it's definitely a surprise," she said, hugging them both. As they sat down together, eating the slightly burnt pancakes, Tiana felt something deep gratitude. Her home wasn't fancy. Her life wasn't perfect. But it was hers, built with her own hands, her own courage, her own strength. Years later, Tiana's cafe became one of the most loved places in the city. People from all walks of life came there, not just for coffee, but for comfort. Her story quietly spread of the single mother who never gave up, who faced pain and turned it into purpose. Jalen grew up to become a teacher. Ava dreamed of opening her own bakery beside her mother's cafe, and Tiana, she finally found peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting the past, but the kind that comes from accepting it every evening. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, she'd sit by the cafe window with her cup of tea, watching people smile and laugh, and she'd smile too, because she had made it, because she had risen, because she had survived everything meant to break her.